What if the most terrifying moment at Hardhome is not the dead rising from the frozen earth, not the wall of cold darkness sweeping across the water, not the screaming, but the silence? What if, in that silence, something ancient and calculating looks at Jon Snow and decides with complete deliberation to let him live? The shore at Hardhome is chaos made visible, bodies falling, wildlings running, the air itself turning brittle and weaponized by a cold that has no natural business existing in the world of the living. Jon Snow is already moving, already pulling survivors toward the boats, his mind operating on the pure mechanical instinct of a soldier who knows that thinking too clearly in the wrong moment gets men killed. He does not look back, and then he does. The Night King stands at the edge of the dock, elevated above the carnage, and he is completely still. Not still in the way of a man conserving energy, not still in the way of something waiting to strike, still in the way of something that has already made its decision and is simply allowing the world to catch up to it. Around him, the dead do exactly what the dead do. They rise, they overwhelm, they consume everything they touch. But the Night King is not watching his army. He is watching Jon Snow. Jon stops moving. This is the significant detail. A man in the middle of a catastrophe, surrounded by people desperate to pull him forward, stops moving because something in the base architecture of his instincts recognizes that he is being studied. The Night King raises his arms, slow and deliberate, a gesture that is almost ceremonial in its precision. The dead respond. The dead always respond. But his eyes never leave Jon's face. There is no weapon raised, no White Walker sent forward. The dead are rising by the dozens, and the Night King, who commands every one of them, does not direct a single one toward the man standing on the dock. This is the part that defies everything anyone has ever assumed about what the Night King wants. He has the shot. He does not take it. He holds Jon Snow's gaze with the calm, terrifying patience of something that has lived through more winters than human language has words for. And then the boats pull away, and the shore disappears into the dark. Jon replays it obsessively on the water. He sits at the bow of the boat, still and damp and pale, and Davos watches him the way experienced soldiers watch men who have seen something that has reorganized their understanding of the world. When Jon finally speaks, his voice is flat with the particular flatness of someone trying to make sense of information that refuses to make sense. He tells Davos that the Night King could have killed him, that he had every reason to, that there was nothing and no one preventing it. Davos does not offer comfort, because Davos is too smart for comfort when what is needed is clarity, and neither man has clarity to offer. He does not finish a reassuring thought. He does not need to try. What if the recognition in those pale eyes is not the recognition of an enemy? What if it is something older than that? Something that predates the categories of enemy and ally entirely. Castle Black settles around Jon like a familiar coat that no longer quite fits. He goes through the duties of command, the meetings, the reports, the 1,000 small administrative demands of holding a place like the Wall together. But something has shifted in him at a level below language. The dreams begin quietly at first, fragments rather than full images, the way all important things begin. Ice, but not threatening ice. Ice that seems to have structure, intention, geometry. Faces that are not faces he knows, but that his sleeping mind treats with the deference of recognition. He wakes from these dreams not afraid, but disturbed in a more complicated way. The way a man is disturbed when a locked room he has passed 100 times turns out to have a door. Melisandre feels it before she understands it. This is the nature of her gift. Sensation before comprehension. The world pressing meaning against her before offering her the language to name it. She has been watching the fire for signs since Hardhome, and the fire has been showing her things that do not fit her existing framework for what the long night means. She pulls old texts from places they have not been pulled from in a very long time. Valyrian, which is itself a language of fire and ruin. But the texts she needs are older even than that. Records of the first long night, written by people who survived it and carried the memory forward in the only form memory can survive. Terror pressed into words. She finds a passage she has seen before, but never read correctly. She reads it now. Her hands do not tremble, but they go very still against the page. The white arrives before dawn. It stands at the outer gate of Castle Black, the way a man stands when he has been told to wait, not pressing, not clawing, not doing any of the things the dead do when they want to remind you of what they are. The ranging party finds it on their return, just as the gray light begins to separate from the gray sky, and for a long moment, none of them move either, because there is something in stillness that demands stillness in return. One of the men raises a torch. The white does not flinch from the light. Its eyes hold that familiar cold luminescence, the blue that belongs to no living thing, but its hands are at its sides, and it is holding something. A single piece of dragon glass, not a weapon pointed outward, but a shard cradled almost carefully in both palms, and carved into its surface are markings that the rangers cannot name, but somehow cannot look away from. Spirals turning inward on themselves, older than anything the men have words for. What if the message is not for the rangers at all? What if it was never meant for any of them? Jon Snow stands before the shard within the hour, and he understands immediately that what he is looking at is not random. The spirals are deliberate. The carving is precise in the way that only patience makes things precise. Not haste, not violence, but something that took time, which means something that chose to take time. He turns the shard in the firelight, and the symbols seem to breathe, the shadows in each groove shifting as the flame moves. And he has the unsettling sensation that the message is not static, but responsive, that it is engaging with the light, the way a letter engages with the eyes of its intended reader. Sam's letters from the Citadel have been arriving in irregular intervals, dense with the cramped urgency of a man who has learned to write faster than he can think, because he has found more than he expected to find. Jon has read each one twice. He reads the relevant ones a third time now, cross-referencing passages about the pre-First Men markings found in certain cave systems, certain stones, certain places where the children of the forest had pressed their knowledge into surfaces that could outlast them. The spirals are not decoration. Sam had written that with 3 underlines beneath the word not, which is as close as Sam ever comes to shouting. They are a form of structured meaning, a kind of language that predates the first men's arrival on this continent, a system the children used to encode things they considered foundational. Origins, warnings, the terms of agreements reached across distances of time and difference that made all human negotiations look brief and simple. Jon sets the letter down. He looks at the shard again. The Night King is not threatening. He is corresponding. The council that assembles in the solar is not comfortable with this conclusion. Tormund's skepticism is not the thoughtless kind. It is the kind that has kept him alive in conditions that kill men who think too much, and he wears it accordingly, arms crossed and jaw set, his eyes moving between Jon and the shard on the table, as if measuring which one is more likely to destroy them. Davos says little, but his hands are moving in that way they move when he is doing arithmetic with uncertain numbers, adding and subtracting risk in a ledger only he can see. Melisandre stands apart from the others near the window, and she is watching Jon with an expression that is not quite recognition and not quite fear, but exists in the complicated territory between them. Jon argues his position the way a man argues when he already knows most of the room believes he is wrong. He does not argue loudly. He does not need to. He lays the logic forward the way a good commander lays ground, methodically, with each piece placed to support the next, so that the structure becomes harder to dismiss as it builds. The Night King had him at Hardhome. That is the beginning. That is the point everything else proceeds from. He had him, and he did not take him, and then he reached across an impossible distance to send a carved piece of obsidian to the gates of Castle Black, carrying symbols that say, "There is something older than this war that you do not yet understand." He wants something, Jon says. Everyone who has ever sent a message wants something, Davos replies. The question is whether what he wants is something you survive giving him. The fire crackles between them. No one fills the silence. Jon picks up the shard a second time, and Melisandre takes one step forward from the window. Just one. But everyone in the room notices it. Because she has been reading about this moment in texts that are older than living memory, and she has just realized she has found the passage that explains what she is looking at. She has not told anyone yet what that passage says. The valley arrives before they expect it. That is the first sign that something is already guiding this, already shaping the terms of their approach. Jon had estimated 2 days of riding north from the wall's shadow, navigating by the crude compass of the carved symbols Tormund had studied with the focused suspicion of a man reading a trap. It takes 1 day and part of a night. The land seems to compress around them, the distances folding in ways that have no natural explanation. And when they crest the final ridge and look down into the bowl of frozen stone below, Ghost stops, not slows, stops, planted, 4 paws pressed into the ice as though rooting himself against something invisible pressing forward. And Jon reads that stillness the way he has always read the direwolf. As intelligence reporting back from a register he cannot access himself. Something is already here. Something has been waiting. The Night King stands at the valley's floor alone. No army, no whites assembled in their ranked, patient silence, no lieutenants positioned on the surrounding ridgelines. Just the figure himself, standing in the center of the frozen basin, as though he has been there long enough to become part of its geography. And the absolute quiet around him is its own form of pressure. Tormund's hand moves toward his axe and then stops. He does not finish the motion. He does not need to, because Jon has already reached across and placed a single steadying grip on his arm that says, "Not yet. Possibly not ever." They do not yet know what this is. They descend. The cold changes texture as they enter the valley. It becomes something more than temperature, a density, a weight that presses against thought as much as skin. And Jon feels the boundary crossing, not as a physical threshold, but as a shift in the quality of his own awareness. The world above the ridge belongs to one kind of reality. The world below belongs to another, older one, and the rules governing both are not entirely the same. He dismounts before he reaches the bottom. It feels necessary. It feels like protocol for something ancient and formal that his body understands before his mind catches up. Davos stays with the horses. Tormund stays 3 paces behind. Ghost presses to Jon's right side and does not leave it. And the 4 of them cross the last stretch of stone toward the figure who does not move, does not shift his gaze, does not signal recognition or threat. He simply waits with the patience of something that has existed so long that the concept of waiting has lost all negative charge for him. The vision comes without warning. One moment, Jon is standing on frozen ground, his breath clouding in front of him. The Night King 12 feet away, with those eyes like split winter sky. The next, he is somewhere else, or rather he is both places at once, which is its own particular disorientation. He sees a forest that has never existed in his lifetime. Old-growth trees so dense their canopy turns midday to dusk. And in a clearing at the forest's heart, men he recognizes as the first men stand in a circle with figures that are not men, small and ancient, and carved from something older than the world's current arrangement. A pact is being made, not spoken. The words have no sound in this vision, but sealed in blood and in the particular biological inheritance that blood carries forward through generations, an agreement written into the body itself so that no parchment is needed, no signature required. The contract becomes the bloodline. The bloodline becomes the obligation. And somewhere in the chain of descent that runs from those men in that clearing down through the centuries to a bastard who does not yet know he is no bastard at all, the thread runs unbroken. Jon understands this before he can articulate it. He is back in the valley. The Night King's gaze has not changed, but something between them has. A recognition now present in the space that was not there before, and it costs the Night King something to hold it, some expenditure of effort, visible only in the faintest tension in that ancient face. He did not choose this march. That is what comes next, communicated in no language Jon can name, but arriving complete nonetheless. The way true things sometimes arrive, bypassing translation entirely. Something was triggered. Something was awakened in the corrupted core of the magic that made him what he is. Something that the return of dragons to the world had struck like a hammer against a cracked bell, and the resonance had driven him south, not as a general executing strategy, but as a force being pulled by a mechanism older than his own will. He is not entirely free. He is not entirely gone either. Jon stands in the silence of that understanding, and the question forming behind his teeth is not whether to believe it. The question, the one that will determine everything that follows, is what a man does with a weapon that does not want to be aimed. Ghost presses harder against his leg. The library beneath the citadel does not sleep. That is the first thing Sam had learned when he arrived in Old Town. That the great archive breathes at all hours, that somewhere in its vaulted dark, there is always a candle burning, always a hand turning a page, always some maester or acolyte chasing a fact through corridors of ink and vellum. He had found it comforting once, the constancy of it, the way knowledge accumulated here like sediment, layer upon layer, indifferent to the wars being fought above. he does not find it comforting now. The raven from Jon had arrived 3 days prior, and what it contained had not permitted him to sleep since. Not properly. He had read the letter 4 times in the candlelight of his small cell, holding it as one holds something that might bite, and each reading had surfaced new and terrible implications from beneath the first. Stark blood, dragon fire, the Night King and his apparent pause. These were not the ingredients of coincidence. These were the ingredients of a mechanism, something designed. What if the story everyone has always told is simply the story that survived? He had begun in the accessible galleries, moving quickly through the common histories, the familiar accounts of the Long Night and the Battle for the Dawn. The same versions every educated person in Westeros had read to them, or had absorbed through the telling of it at suppers and firesides across 10,000 years. In those accounts, the Night King was a monster, corruption made flesh, the thing that crept in when warmth failed. Sam had believed this the way one believes in the shape of the world, not because he had verified it, but because everything else was built upon it. Then he had gone deeper. The restricted galleries of the Citadel are not locked in the dramatic fashion of stories. There is no single forbidden door, no dramatic key. The restriction is architectural, bureaucratic, the product of centuries of careful curating. Certain texts shelved in places that require permission to access, permission that requires seniority, seniority that requires patience. Sam does not currently have and has decided not to pretend to. He had borrowed a senior Meister's seal 2 nights ago, a decision he has not yet fully examined the ethics of, and had let himself into the lower archive with a lamp held low and his heart performing a complicated series of movements against his ribs. What he found there had taken most of 2 nights to piece together because the account was not whole. It existed in fragments, 3 partial scrolls, a water-damaged codex in Old Valyrian that required the better part of 6 hours to work through, and a series of marginalia scrawled in a cramped hand into the interior cover of an astronomical record that had clearly been used by someone as a hidden communication rather than a star chart. Taken separately, each piece was suggestive and incomplete. Taken together, they constructed something that made the candle flame seem very small and the archive very large. The first Night King had not been a monster at the beginning. The records, older than anything in the accessible galleries, older than the Citadel itself in their original form, copied and recopied through ages by hands that perhaps did not fully understand what they were preserving, described something closer to a guardian, a figure bound into the cold by an act of sacrifice and design, set like a stone in a wall, holding back something that pressed eternally from the other side of death. The Long Night had not been his aggression. It had been a failure of maintenance. A pact had broken, and when the pact broke, the binding changed in nature. What had been a tether became a wound, and what had been a guardian became something that wore his face but served a different purpose entirely. The pact had required renewal. This was the part that settled into Sam's chest like cold water finding a low place. Periodic renewal, enacted at intervals, the records were frustratingly vague about, involving 2 specific elements that appeared in every fragment independently, which meant they were not interpretation, but fact. The first was stark blood. The second was dragon fire. He had sat with that for a very long time. The Targaryens had arrived in Westeros with dragons. What if one of them, early, before the full weight of their dynasty had accumulated, before the dragons were instruments of conquest rather than tools of older obligation, had severed something they did not understand. What if a dragon lord had burned a site, or killed a figure, or simply declined a ritual whose purpose had been obscured by centuries of mistranslation, and in doing so had cracked the mechanism that held the Night King to his purpose? The marginalia gave him a name, a Targaryen name, partially legible, partially water-eaten. He had copied it 3 times to be certain he had the letters right. The ravens went out before dawn, one addressed to Castle Black, one addressed to Dragonstone, each carrying the same essential weight, though dressed in different language. He had not told either of them what to do with the information. He does not know what to do with it himself. What the missing pages would have told him, the exact method of renewal, the precise form the ritual had taken, what stark blood meant in practice, and what Dragonfire was required to do, is gone, consumed by whatever accident or intention had destroyed the rest. He stands now at the window of his cell as the first gray light touches the harbor at Old Town. The reply ravens not yet returned, knowing only that he has handed 2 people the outline of something enormous and withheld from them, through no fault of his own, the one piece that would make it actionable. There is a word for that condition, he thinks. There are several. None of them are comfortable. Then the door to his cell opens without a knock, and the monster standing in the frame is not one he recognizes, and the expression on the man's face is not the expression of someone who has come to discuss scholarship. The raven reaches Marine on a morning when the air above the bay sits heavy and still, the kind of stillness that precedes something, not a storm exactly, but a shift, a reorientation of pressure so gradual that no single moment announces it. Daenerys is in the middle of a trade negotiation she does not particularly want to win when the message is placed before her. She reads it once, then again. Then she dismisses the room without explanation, and the merchants file out with the particular wounded dignity of men who have mistaken an interruption for an insult. She does not mistake it. She understands precisely what the letter is. What she cannot immediately determine is what it requires of her. The dragons have known something longer than she has. That is the unsettling truth she returns to in the days following, as she sits with the letter and turns it against the light and reads Samwell Tarly's careful, earnest hand for perhaps the 7th time. Drogon has not slept easily in weeks. Rhaegal circles the bay at hours when no wind demands it, banking in tight arcs as if tracking something only he can sense along the northern horizon. Viserion, the most settled of the 3, has taken to landing on the walls of the pyramid at dusk, and sitting there through the dark hours, wings folded, eyes open, watching north. Daenerys's writers call it restlessness. She thinks it is something older than that. She thinks they are listening. The visions come on the 4th night. She does not go looking for them. She is standing before the brazier in her private chamber, and the flame, responding to nothing she has done, shifts from orange to a blue so pale it is nearly white, and in that cold fire she sees him. A man standing in snow, bareheaded, dark-haired, with a wound that should have killed him and did not. Beside him, enormous and silver gray, a direwolf stands with its head raised and its yellow eyes open, and the sky above them both is not a sky in any natural sense, but a canopy of falling white so dense it swallows the horizon entire. The man does not move. The wolf does not move. They are waiting. She does not tell her advisors about the vision immediately. She tells Missandei, who says nothing for a long moment, and then says, quietly, that the dragons have been looking north. Daenerys says she knows. They stand together in that knowledge for a while, and then Daenerys says she will need to begin preparations. What shifts in the political architecture of the known world is immediate and almost invisible in its subtlety. Daenerys' attention turns north, away from Westeros, or rather, away from the conquest of Westeros, and Cersei, seated in King's Landing behind her walls and her gold and her recently consolidated grip on the small council, does not immediately feel the change in pressure. She will. Not yet. But Daenerys' dragons moving north toward White Harbor, rather than west toward Blackwater Bay, represents a strategic vacuum that will, in time, draw consequences into it, the way all vacuums do. For now, Cersei's position holds. Unchallenged is not the same as secure, but it is not nothing. In the north, the rallying happens in the language of fear rather than politics. The lords who ride to Jon Snow do not come bearing calculations about succession and legitimacy and northern independence. They come because the reports filtering down from the wall are the kind that men repeat only in lowered voices, breaches appearing in sections of the magical fortifications that have held for 8,000 years. Not physical breaches, but something stranger. Places where the old wards have gone thin and cold and wrong, where the Night's Watchmen report a silence so absolute it feels inhabited. Whatever the Night King's purpose in sparing Jon Snow at Hardhome, the world has registered it as a pause rather than a peace, and the pause is wearing through. Daenerys lands Drogon on the waterfront at White Harbor, and the city stops. That is the only honest word for it. Everything stops. Then Jon Snow walks through the stopped city to meet her, and the first thing she registers is the scar, and the first thing he registers is that she already knows. She holds out the letter, her copy, edges worn from handling. He reaches into his coat and produces its twin. They stand on the dock with the gray northern sea behind them and the dragons overhead, making that low resonant sound they have made since crossing the Bight, and neither of them says anything about the strangeness of the moment, because neither of them needs to. The letter mentions a ritual, Jon says, but not what it is. Yes, she says, it does. He looks at her steadily. Sam sent a second raven. I had one arrive this morning. He says he's found something else, or someone did. He says he isn't sure the pages were destroyed by accident. The wind off the harbor moves between them. Drogon descends to the dock, and the wood groans under the weight, and neither of them looks up. Sam arrives at Winterfell 2 days ahead of the snows, his horse lathered and his saddlebags heavier than they look. He does not announce himself in the yard. He goes straight to the library. Bran is already there. This is not coincidence, and Sam knows better than to treat it as one. The boy sits in the pale morning light with his hands open on the armrests of his chair, and his eyes carrying that distant quality that means some part of him is elsewhere, threaded through roots and bark and the slow memory of trees older than any kingdom that has ever claimed these lands. Sam sets his bags down without a word and begins to unpack, and by the time he lays the final documents on the table, Bran's eyes have returned to the present, and he speaks first. What they reconstruct together over the course of a long and increasingly cold afternoon is not a comfortable thing to know. The binding flame ritual is old enough that no single source contains it whole. Sam had found fragments in Old Town, pages nested inside a treatise on pre-Andal funerary law, misshelved or perhaps deliberately hidden among records no one had examined in generations. Bran supplies the remainder, pulling it not from any book, but from the Weirwood network itself, from the layered impressions of a moment 12,000 years in the past when two figures stood at the edge of a frozen lake and spoke words that were meant to hold the world together. He describes what he sees without inflection. Sam writes it down with hands that are not entirely steady. The ritual requires three things. Jon must speak the original words of the pact in the old tongue at the site of a weirwood heart tree. The binding must be rooted in living wood, in the same way the first was. Daenerys must channel dragonfire through the moment of speaking, not as a weapon, but as witness, the fire completing a circle that the words alone cannot close. And the Night King must be present, not subdued, not restrained, not standing at sword point in the posture of a defeated enemy. Willing. Sam underlines the word twice and then sets the quill down and looks at it. The Northern Lords do not take the news well. That evening, in the great hall of Winterfell, with the fires burning high and the faces of 24 bannermen arranged in various configurations of anger, Sansa sits at the head of the table with the stillness of someone who has already felt this particular weight settling and has chosen to bear it upright. She does not speak first. She lets the room speak first. She always does. Lyanna Mormont speaks loudest because Lyanna Mormont always does, and what she says is what most of them are thinking. That the creature who marched their fathers and brothers and sons across the frozen north in its army, who raised their dead kin to fight against them, who wore something like amusement at the long night, as though it were simply a demonstration of patience, is now to be invited into a ritual as a partner, an equal, a willing participant. That they are being asked not merely to endure this, but to require it. That the ritual cannot work without his consent. She does not finish the sentence. She does not need to. Jon speaks last, and he speaks without theater. He stands at the far end of the table, and he does not raise his voice above what is necessary to be heard. And what he says is this: he cannot offer justice. He cannot offer vengeance. He cannot promise the living will feel whole when this is finished, because he does not believe wholeness is what waits on the other side of it. What waits is continuation, the ongoing possibility of mourning. He tells them that the harder path is not always the righteous one, and that he has made his peace with that, and he does not ask them to make the same peace, only to permit it. The silence that follows is the kind that means most of the room is still deciding, not hostile, not converted, suspended. Sansa watches Jon across the length of the table with an expression Sam cannot fully read. There is something in it that is not disagreement. There is something in it that is not approval either. It is the look of someone calculating distances. The wildlings say nothing at all, which in its own way is a kind of answer. Tormund, standing at the back near the door with his arms crossed and his jaw set, meets Jon's eyes once across the room. A long look, something passing through it that has no name in any language Sam knows. Then he looks away, and Jon looks away, and the fire continues burning. It is Bran who speaks next, quietly, from his chair near the hearth. He says that making contact with the Night King is possible. He says he has already begun. The north moves like a held breath. The trees press inward as the group travels deeper, the haunted forest closing around them, the way water closes over a stone. Slowly, completely, without ceremony. The pines here are ancient things, their trunks wide as towers, their branches so thickly interlocked overhead that the gray sky above becomes something glimpsed rather than seen. A pale suggestion of light filtering down through needles that have not changed in 1,000 years. The ground beneath them is frozen in a way that goes beyond season. This is old cold, the kind that remembers. Daenerys rides at the center of the formation, Drogon circling low above the canopy, and Rhaegal banking wider to the east, where the tree line breaks against a ridge of black stone. Viserion moves to the west, golden and pale against the dead sky, his wings cutting slow arcs through air that tastes of iron and ancient things disturbed. The Night King travels at the front of the column, not on horseback, simply walking the way he has always walked, as if arrival is inevitable and urgency belongs only to the living. Jon watches him from several paces back. He has been watching him for hours. There is something different in the Night King's movements since they crossed the boundary where the Children's Cave network runs deepest beneath the earth, where the roots of the oldest weirwoods descend through bedrock and touch something that has no name in any language Jon knows. The Night King walks with more deliberate effort. His head is lowered. The muscles along his jaw are working in a way that suggests not thought, but resistance, as though something moves through him that he is actively pressing against. And then the west erupts. There's no sound that precedes it, or rather, the sound arrives simultaneously with the event. A crack that is not thunder and not ice-breaking, but something in between, something that belongs to neither the living world nor the dead one. The magic comes in a wave. That is the only word for it. A wave that moves through the air the way a wave moves through water, visible in the distortion it creates, in the way the trees along the western edge bend inward and the snow lifts from the ground in a curtain of white. Viserion meets it full in the chest. The dragon does not cry out. He simply stops. His wings arrest their motion at the peak of an upstroke, locked in place for one long, awful moment, and then everything releases at once. He falls. He falls the way large things fall, with a weight that seems to pull the air down with him, and he strikes the tree line and the trees give way, and then there is only the sound of that impact, rolling outward through the forest, enormous and final. Daenerys does not scream. The grief that moves through her is too large for that, too structural, more like the collapse of a foundation than anything that could be expressed through sound. She moves toward the western tree line on instinct, and Jon is already moving, already between her and the direction the wave came from, already facing the Night King, whose body has stopped walking and whose face is not what Jon expected, not triumph, not indifference. The Night King stands with both hands drawn inward toward his chest, and his face is contorted with something that is effort and only effort, the expression of a man holding a wall against pressure that cannot be held indefinitely. Jon says his name. He does not have a name. Jon says what he has been calling him in his own mind for weeks, a sound that is not quite language, and the Night King's eyes find his, and there is communication in them that bypasses speech entirely. This was not chosen. The look says this clearly. This was not chosen. Whatever drives him, whatever ancient force the children woke in that cave in that moment before history, it surged without his permission, and Viserion is dead because of something the Night King could not entirely contain. Daenerys has stopped. She stands at the edge of the trees, and she is looking at the Night King with the same devastated focus she is using to not look at what lies beyond the tree line. Jon can see her calculating. He can see the grief in her going to work on itself, reshaping, hardening into something that can still move forward. She turns from the western trees. She faces the direction of the ritual site. The cave network entrance is less than a mile ahead, the deep root place where the children's oldest magic still pools in the dark. She does not speak. She walks. She walks past the Night King, past Jon, past all of it, and her shoulders do not shake, and her pace does not falter, and Drogon descends through a break in the canopy and lands behind her and follows, and Jon stands alone for a moment in the silence of what has just been decided. The Night King watches her go. Then he looks at Jon. His hands are still pressed inward, still braced against something internal, and whatever discipline he possesses is visible now as a real and finite thing, a resource with limits. Jon holds his gaze, a long look. The question is not whether they continue. The question is whether what just happened can happen again before they reach the site, and whether next time the cost will be Drogon, and whether Daenerys will survive that calculation a second time. Jon falls into step behind her. The forest receives them all. The cave mouth opens in the rock face like an exhaled breath held for 10,000 years. The stone around its edges is older than the wall, older than the name Stark, older than the first word spoken in any tongue that men still remember. The carvings begin at ground level and climb upward in spiraling channels worn smooth not by tools, but by something more patient than tools. By time itself pressing its thumb into the stone and drawing. Jon has seen carvings like these before. In the cave beneath Dragonstone, in the tunnels beneath Winterfell's oldest foundations. But here, they are not decorative. Here, they are structural, the way load-bearing walls are structural, and the air around them moves differently, thicker at the threshold, charged with a pressure that sits just behind the eyes. Tormund and Davos take position at the entrance without being asked. Tormund's sword is drawn, and his jaw is set, and he does not look at Jon, because if he looks at Jon, he will say something, and there is nothing left to say. Davos stands slightly behind him, and his hands are trembling, not from cold, and not from fear exactly, but from the particular trembling of a man who has watched too many impossible things happen and has run out of the capacity to absorb them without physical reaction. He holds the sword anyway. He holds it steady enough. The army of the dead does not advance. It does not retreat. It stands in the trees like a forest within the forest, still and vertical and patient in the way that stones are patient. And the silence they produce is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of held breath, of a world pausing to witness something it has been waiting to witness for longer than it has had the language to anticipate. No branch moves, no snow falls. The cold is absolute, and absolute things have a kind of gravity to them. Jon speaks first. The old tongue comes haltingly, the syllables shaped more by memory than understanding, and yet the cave mouth responds. A low vibration beginning in the rock beneath his boots, traveling upward through the soles of his feet and into his legs, settling somewhere in the base of his chest, like a second heartbeat, arriving slightly out of sync with his own. He does not know what he is saying with precision. He knows what it means. There is a difference. Meaning moves through him like something older than his comprehension of it. The Night King stands opposite him, and the space between them is perhaps 6 feet, and it is the most significant 6 feet of ground in the living world. He does not speak yet. He listens, and there is something in the act of listening that transforms his face, that makes it less than a mask and more than a face, and Jon keeps his eyes forward and keeps the words coming even as some part of him registers the change and catalogs it and stores it in the same place. He stores things he cannot yet afford to understand. Then Drogon's shadow falls across the entrance and the fire comes down. Daenerys guides it with both hands raised and her eyes open, and the concentration on her face is absolute. The concentration of a person doing the most difficult thing she has ever done. Not the most dangerous, not the most painful, but the most precise, the most controlled, the most contrary to instinct. Dragonfire is not meant to be withheld. It is not meant to be shaped into spirals. It is not meant to be placed gently, like a letter set down on a table by hands that know how much is written inside it. And yet, she places it gently. She follows the pattern Sam described, and the pattern the carvings demand, and the fire touches the ground between Jon and the Night King, and traces the spiral outward, and the air drops, and the low resonant sound that has been building from the earth becomes audible to everyone present. A sound below sound, a frequency that the body hears before the ears do. The Night King extends his hand into the dragonfire. He does not flinch. The fire does not consume him. It moves around his fingers the way water moves around stone. And for a moment, one single moment that seems to require more time than it occupies, his eyes shift. The blue leaves them. What replaces the blue is dark brown and ordinary and human and exhausted. Exhausted in the way that only centuries of exhaustion can produce. The kind of tiredness that has forgotten what rest would even feel like. Jon sees the face. He has seen it before. In the dreams that have come since the long night began. In the half-waking hours before dawn, when the visions arrived without invitation and left without explanation. The same face looking back at him from across distances that were not geographical. He knows this face. He knows it the way you know something you were never taught, but always carried. The Night King opens his mouth. One word. Old tongue, spoken with the voice of a man and not a creature, spoken quietly, spoken as though it had been waiting inside him for an age. The word means remembered. The white light comes without warning and without sound, and it is not an explosion, and it is not a collapse. It is a completion, the way the last note of something resolves the whole. And for a single blinding instant, the cave and the trees and the army and the fire and Jon and the Night King and all of it exists inside the same held moment. And then the light releases, and the world reassembles itself in the dark. Jon is on one knee. He does not know when he went to one knee. The ground beneath him is warm, the spiral pattern of the dragonfire still glowing faintly in the rock, and the army of the dead has not moved, but something about the stillness has changed. The held breath quality is gone, replaced by something else, something that takes a moment to identify, and then it resolves. The dead are waiting, yes, but they are waiting differently now, and the Night King is still standing, and his eyes are blue again, and he is looking at his own hand as though he has not seen it clearly in a very long time. Tormund says nothing. Davos says nothing. The forest does not offer an answer to the question of what has just occurred, and the ritual has completed. But the completion is not an ending. It is a door, and the door is standing open, and what waits on the other side of it has not yet declared itself. The stillness holds for a long moment, and then it does not hold anymore. It happens quietly, the way snow settles rather than falls. The army of the dead simply stops being an army, not a collapse, not a violence, not the dramatic undoing of some great spell shattered by force. The whites go still first, one after another across the haunted forest, the animating cold withdrawing from their bones the way tide withdraws from shore, leaving everything behind it simply and completely empty. The White Walkers follow, their ancient forms ceasing without ceremony, and the sound that fills the silence left behind them is nothing more than snowfall, the soft, indifferent percussion of winter doing what winter does, which is continue regardless of what the living or the dead have decided among themselves. Jon stays on one knee for a long time. The spiral of dragonfire beneath him has begun to cool, but the warmth remains in the stone, pressing up through the leather of his trousers, and he is grateful for it in a way that has nothing to do with cold. He is grateful for it because it is real, because it confirms that the ground is still here, that the world is still here, that what just occurred and did not unmake everything in the process of occurring. When he finally stands, he sees it. The Night King is gone. There is no body, no evidence of a form that occupied this space for longer than human memory reaches back. Only the ground where he stood, and lying on that ground, resting in the faint depression left by nothing the eye can identify, the obsidian shard, cracked cleanly down the center, 2 pieces. He crosses to it and crouches and picks up both halves, holding them together in his palm like something that might be rejoined, knowing it cannot be, knowing that the crack is the point. The break is not failure. The break is completion. He does not speak. There is nothing to say that the shard does not already say more precisely in its silence. Tormund comes to stand beside him, and for a while they both look at what Jon is holding, and the forest around them is the quietest thing either of them has ever stood inside. The free folk are moving through the fallen shapes of whites, not fearfully, but with the careful attention of people who have spent their whole lives reading terrain, and what they are reading now is a landscape that has changed in ways they cannot yet fully articulate, but understand in their bodies. The threat is gone, not won against, gone. There is a distinction, and Tormund knows it, which is why his face carries something other than triumph. He tells Jon that the free folk will remember this night. He says it carefully, which is not how Tormund usually says things, and the care is its own kind of signal. They will remember it, he says, not the way songs remember things, not as a victory to be celebrated with the names of the brave and the tally of the fallen and the moment the darkness broke. They will remember it the way people remember older things, a debt that had been accumulating longer than anyone living could measure, and the debt has been settled. A door that was always left open behind them as they moved south and then further south and then into walls and kings and the ordinary cruelties of living among their own kind. The door has been closed, not locked, closed. Jon nods. He understands that what happened here will become a story that simplifies what it touches, the way all stories do, because the full shape of this night does not fit inside language designed for victories and defeats. Somewhere south, in halls he has not yet returned to, people will eventually begin to compose the version of this that can be repeated, and the version will not be wrong exactly, only smaller than the truth. Far to the south, in the dark before the first gray suggestion of morning reaches the sky, Daenerys kneels in the place where Viserion died. There is no audience for this grief, no witness she would want. The ground there still carries the marks of what happened, and she does not speak to them, does not perform anything for them. She simply remains in the place where he fell and lets the knowing of it be complete inside her, which is the only thing she can offer him, and the only thing he ever needed from her, which was to be known entirely. Jon wraps both halves of the obsidian shard in a strip of cloth and places them against his chest, inside his cloak. He does not yet know what he will do with them. He does not yet know what the morning will require of him. And the morning is coming now, the darkness beginning to soften at its edges in the way darkness always eventually does. Tormund is looking east when he says it. His voice carries no drama, only the particular flatness of someone stating a thing they have thought carefully before speaking. He says, Winterfell has sent ravens. Winterfell has sent ravens. The words settle into the cold morning air without urgency, without theater, only the quiet insistence of a world that has decided to continue. Tormund does not elaborate. He does not need to. The message is in the fact of it. That somewhere to the south, behind walls of gray stone and banners that have survived everything thrown against them, someone is waiting for an answer. Jon reads the ravens in the pale first hour of daylight, standing alone outside the camp, while the fire behind him breathes its low smoke into a sky that is finally, unmistakably, beginning to lighten towards something other than gray. The messages are not commands. They are not pleas. They are simply the careful words of a woman who has learned to govern by writing only what needs to be said. Sansa does not ask him to come back as Lord. She asks him to come back as a brother, which is the harder thing to ask, and the only thing she actually wants. He arrives at Winterfell in the turning of the season, when the first thin suggestion of warmth is returning to the air, and the ground beneath the gates is no longer frozen solid. Ghost moves ahead of him without instruction, as though the direwolf has already resolved something that Jon is still working through. The gates open. He does not arrive to ceremony. He arrives to her, standing in the yard with her hands folded in front of her, her expression carrying the particular steadiness of someone who has already decided what this moment means and refuses to let it be made into anything else. What he tells her is simple, and he tells it plainly. The North needs someone who wants to build it, he says, someone whose eyes stay on the walls and the harvest, and the people inside them, rather than always pointing at whatever lies beyond the next horizon. He is not that person. He has never been that person. He says it without apology and without self-diminishment, only with the clarity of someone who has finally arrived at an honest accounting of themselves, which is perhaps the rarest kind of courage. Not the kind that faces armies, but the kind that faces mirrors. Sansa takes up the rule of an independent North with a steadiness that surprises even herself. She does not take it the way others have taken power, through declaration and theater and the accumulated performance of authority. She takes it the way water takes the shape of stone, quietly, completely, without announcing that the shaping has begun. The lords who expected to test her find instead that she has already anticipated the test and resolved it before they reached the table. The small folk who expected to be forgotten find instead that their names are known, their circumstances considered, their needs written in her careful hand in the ledgers she keeps herself. The North does not become perfect, it becomes cared for. It becomes, for the first time in a very long time, genuinely tended. Daenerys does not arrive at the southern kingdoms with fire. She arrives with Drogon circling at a height that suggests presence rather than threat, and with words that have been shaped by everything she witnessed in the forest. The stillness, the ancient negotiation, the understanding that some powers are not meant to be wielded, but honored. Cersei yields not to an army, but to something quieter and more absolute. The simple reality that winter has broken, that the dead did not come, that the world continued without the Iron Throne mattering to its survival in any meaningful way. The throne is still there. It is simply no longer the point of anything. The peace that follows is measured and imperfect and real, which is the only kind of peace that lasts. Jon rides north of the Wall in the early days of the new season, Ghost at his side, a small company of wildlings behind him who have not followed him out of obligation, but out of the particular loyalty that forms between people who have faced something enormous together and come through it changed. He does not ride in exile. That distinction matters. He rides by choice, which is a thing he has not fully had before, and he carries it with the careful attention of someone who knows what it cost to earn it. The wall still stands. The forest beyond it is still dark, still deep, still holding whatever it has always held at its oldest center. But the silence that lives there now is not the silence of held breath, not the silence of something waiting to strike. It is the silence of an agreement kept, of an ancient understanding renewed in the way all lasting things are renewed, not through force or fire, but through someone choosing, quietly and without witness, to hold to what was promised. The long night has ended. The world that remained is imperfect and breathing, and in the only way that has ever truly mattered, at rest.